Do you trust the benevolence of the universe? Earlier in the year, I had a video that went viral with over 5.7 million views, and there were thousands of comments, a lot of positive comments, but there was also a lot of negative comments, particularly about me saying that the universe is benevolent. A lot of people had a very hard time with this. There was a lot of criticism, people saying, what about war? What about suffering? What about people in famine? And I get it. I really do. So today I'm going to break it down and explain exactly what I mean when I talk about the benevolence of the universe. Hi, I'm Maggie. Welcome to my channel. I make videos about living a joyful and meaningful life. Let's dive in. Albert Einstein said, one of the most important decisions you will make is whether or not you believe the universe is friendly or hostile. How you answer that question shapes how you interpret everything in your life. And I know it sounds like a spiritual cliche, let go and let God, trust the process, thy will, not my will. I get it sounds cliche, but cliches are cliches for a reason. When I say trust the universe, I don't mean sit back and do nothing. It doesn't mean tolerating abuse or being passive. For me, it ultimately means that life is happening for us and not to us. Everything is orchestrated for our growth. Because the thing is, most people think that life is about being happy. They're searching for happiness. But I don't believe happiness is the point. This is schoolroom earth. Our whole point here is to evolve. We experience challenges. We work through the challenges. We work through the conflict. We harmonize that. We learn and we grow. So we are always challenged here to grow on earth. We might have moments of being happy, but if we're seeking purely just to be happy all the time, I think we're missing the point. Editing Maggie here. We may not be happy all the time, but we can find joy. We can find joy through the challenges. So as I said earlier, a lot of the pushback came from people saying, what about people in war zones? What about the suffering? What about the tragedy? What about the famines? What about children that are born into like the most horrific of circumstances? And my response may be controversial for some people, but I'm just sharing my perspective with you. And it is just my perspective, but whatever your perspective is crucial in how you interpret what's going on. So this is key. If you believe that we just have one life, then of course everything is unfair. If you have a person born into privilege in the West versus someone who is born into absolute poverty and just dire situation, how can that be fair? If there's one life, how can that be fair? It's not fair. But if you believe that we have multiple lives, that we have more than one go here at Schoolroom Earth, that we're growing and evolving with each life there's lessons to learn. We come down here with a specific lesson in mind, then that changes things. Of course, the ego, the personality would never choose that situation. You would never choose the heartache. You would never choose the accident. Of course not. But the soul has other ideas. The soul is all about growth. There's a saying, a bad day for the ego is a great day for the soul, and a great day for the ego is a bad day for the soul. I really love that saying. If you think about the fiercely independent person who has a stroke and then has to rely on other people to look after them, or I have a friend who kept getting the messages to slow down, slow down, slow down, and they weren't, so they literally broke their leg and then were forced to slow down. These things happen. The universe isn't punishing us, it's giving us material to grow. And yes, sometimes it's the deepest tragedies, a parent losing a child, like the worst of the worst, the most horrific tragedies. This can crack their heart open in a way that couldn't have happened through any other means, if they so but choose. From a one-life perspective, that looks incredibly cruel. But from a multiple life perspective, from a soul perspective, that's evolution. Two things can be true at the same time. Tragedy and growth, loss and transformation. I remind myself of this daily when I'm grounding in the earth. I put my feet on the earth and there's a few processes I go through, and then I tell myself 3 things I'm grateful for and 1 challenge that I'm grateful for. Because our challenges is the material the universe is giving us to work with. It reminds me to be grateful for the challenges, which actually makes it easier to work through, to bear, to get through. If it doesn't challenge you, it doesn't change you. You've probably heard the saying, everything happens for a reason. And I think this is only half true, because we also have free will. This is a free will universe. We can choose to do whatever we want to do. So for example, when I was younger, when I was 30, I met this guy. He wanted to go out with me. I knew it was the wrong thing. I knew, but I still went along with it. So some people would say, oh, you were meant to be with him to learn whatever you needed to learn. But actually, there was a higher loving choice. The highest loving choice for me was to listen to that voice, that intuitive hit saying, not a good idea, and to have not been with him. That was the most loving thing. Once I made the decision to be with him, that became the highest choice because I'd cut off the other choice. So there's always a higher choice and we're just aiming for the highest choice we can. But if we make a lower choice, that then becomes the highest choice. And we mine that experience for learning. There's learning in everything, and that's the whole point. We can turn any blessing into a curse and any curse into a blessing. So that situation, being with that person, mining that experience for all the learning and all the growth that I can, turned that curse into a blessing. But it wasn't the highest choice, and we're not always exactly where we're meant to be. And this can be a hard lesson to learn because the New Age movement will have you believe that everything is love and light and you're exactly where you're meant to be, and it's just simply not true. It's a very Pollyanna view of the world. It's really quite immature, and I thought that way for many, many years. I would find myself in these situations and then make myself feel better by, well, I'm obviously meant to be here. No, I didn't have the wherewithal to make the better choices. It's hard to trust the universe if you have a victim mindset. I actually had a friend who felt that God wanted her to marry this particular person, so she did. And, a few years later, the marriage didn't work out, and then she blamed God for that. She blamed God for her divorce, taking no responsibility for her actions or her free will and her interpretation of the messages that she was meant to marry this person. Because we're meaning-making machines. We make stories about everything. Everything. We just make meaning about everything. And we interpret God like he's a human. Like it's almost like we project like the authority figures in our lives when we're kids. So however our parents were, if you had punishing parents or strict parents or whatever, we kind of project that onto God and we make God human. He's so not human. He's so not human. And it's interesting, I'm saying he's not human. I had a lot of negative comments about that because I was saying the universe is benevolent, she is benevolent. And a lot of people were like, a she? You lost me at she. They were really angry about that. It's just language. Like, can we gender the universe? Like, it's just the limited English language. It's just interesting what people fixate on. We're so set in our dogma and we just need what we believe to be true. We're so threatened that we may not be right about everything. And how can we understand the mind of God? One of my teachers says that we need to aim to be a little less wrong each day, which I love because it just assumes that we're wrong. So we're just trying to be a little less wrong, which feels like we're working from a place of humility instead of self-righteousness. How can we possibly understand God? Like, we just do our best to commune and follow the instruction. Have a good attitude. Have a grateful heart. There is an awesome book called Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. Very, very famous. You've probably heard of it. And in this book, he discusses how our desire to find meaning can really ease the suffering and help us maintain spiritual freedom despite our circumstances. And, Viktor Frankl famously was in a concentration camp when he wrote this book. It was just an incredible example and a wonderful read. I highly recommend it. If you really struggle to see how the universe is benevolent, you can start a journal and write how God was on my side today and look for all the little things that you notice that could demonstrate that God is actually on your side. Everything, I think, is about interpretation. The worst night of my life led me to stop drinking 15 years ago. The worst night of my life. That was a blessing. It led me to stop drinking. That's the meaning I'm putting on it. I'm putting that meaning on that situation. But that's cultivating a grateful attitude. I have a friend who's endured horrific abuse, like really, and She's one of the most loving, compassionate people that I know. And that brings to mind the Japanese pottery. I don't know how to pronounce it. I'm going to get it wrong. Kintsugi or something like that, where if you damage the pottery or crack it or break it, you seal it up with gold and it becomes a symbol. It's a celebration of resilience, a testament to our ability to heal and grow, and a reminder that, like the bowl, we can become more beautiful and stronger with our scars. Trust is not being passive. It's a partnership. It's really important to decide whether or not you believe you create your own reality. If you believe the universe is against you, you will find endless evidence for that. But if you choose to believe that it's friendly, that it's benevolent, you will find endless evidence for that too. Yes, we create our own reality, but we're actually really co-creating with the universe. We're partnering with life itself. So the universe doesn't speak English, it speaks feelings. And so whatever we feel, whatever we believe to be true, it tries to reflect that. Well, it does reflect that back to us. I love this quote. The universe is under no obligation to make sense to you. I'm an actor, and years ago, I was really struggling with the acting industry. Melbourne's got a very small industry. I wasn't getting any work, and I was getting very frustrated. And one of my friends said to me, the acting industry doesn't owe you anything. And that shook me and it set me free, because I was like, yeah, why am I feeling so entitled that I deserve work just because I decided I wanted to be an actor? No. So I went out and I created my own work. I created and wrote a one-woman show. I co-created a web series with a friend. I really took it into my own hands. I took control of my own career. And it's the same with the universe. The universe is not obliged to make sense to me. It's how I interpret it that's going to determine my experience of it. And I really want to reiterate that I am not standing on a soapbox telling you, you should do this or you should believe this. These are my thoughts and my perspectives, but it's also a work in progress for me. Some things I find much easier to accept. It's much easier to go, oh yes, this is for me and not to me. And there are other things that I struggle with. It is really clear to me that a grateful attitude is key. And sometimes if that's too difficult to reach for, it's hard to be grateful for an accident or something really horrific that's happened. Acceptance can be a stepping stone. And even if you can't accept that that's happened, maybe you can accept that you can't accept that it's happened. And that's where you can start. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you think the universe is benevolent, or do you struggle with that concept? Please keep the comments respectful. Lots of love.